vida no hay método escrito. A mi modo he cometido errores, pero de ellos aprendí poquito. He aprendido a llorar en la vida y también a gozarla bonito. A mi modo he llevado la vida, así pienso seguirla llevando. A mi modo aprendí de mujeres, poco a poco me he ido enseñando.
I'll tell you,
those cigars look great, man.
they look great, huh, Warden? And the music, a mi modo.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Great entry.
You know, Warden, I always tell everybody this song by Los Huracanes del Norte is a mi modo. It's like Frank Sinatra.
One of my favorites.
And mine too. Mine too. Yeah. And I explain it like this to my friends that don't speak Spanish. I tell them it's like hearing Frank Sinatra. I did it my way.
That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
to us. Yes, that's right. Hey, Warden, before we get started, I want to give a warm welcome to another San Diego PD legend, Chris Kilby, who's watching the show. We got 408 from San Jose, all the way from San Jose. Thank you, brother. You're blessed because we have a legend from up north today. We got Doug Collier, another San Diego PD lesson. He's got his Basil Hayden in a glass today, and we're going to have him as a special guest. This guy's a legend, Warden. We're going to see him on our show next week. We got Jim DeJanis. Warden, believe it or not, it's 5 o'clock in the morning where he's at right now. He's watching us all the way from Thailand.
Wow.
And Warden, he was a correctional officer, I believe, for 26 years. He started his career at Pelican Bay. He was on the security squad. The guy is also a legend, and he's watching you all the way from Thailand.
Oh, wow.
We got Ruben Nava over here. He's a former sergeant with the. He was on our show 2 weeks ago with the sheriff's department. Now, Warden, he did I think over 30 years as a sheriff with LA sheriffs. And now, believe it or not, when he retired, I mean, this guy's a legend too. When he retired, he went back. He's now a chaplain with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and he's working in East LA. His last stomping ground as a detective sergeant. He's a chaplain now as a retired. Outstanding. Right? We got BJ Juarez, a brother in Christ, who's watching us also. And we got Ceci Escano, the young lady from the Riverside area, is always watching. I just want to give him a big shout out, everybody that's watching. Sergio Martinez, all the way from San Juan. And we have Big Juarez once again.
Glad to hear of all you guys.
Yeah, Warden. What a blessing. With that said, Bobby, I know that let's talk about what we're drinking. You know, Bobby, tonight I am very excited. And yeah, I know you're probably thinking, hey, ¿qué tomó este vato? You know what I mean? But I'm telling you, I've been hearing about Warden Vasquez back in '84 when I started with corrections. I would hear about his stories when I was going through the Corrections Academy in Gulf, California. I would hear him being the warden at one of the worst prisons at the time.
Was, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, San Quentin. And throughout my career, even when I came on to San Diego PD, I would always hear about you, Warden. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons why we started this program, the Gray Line and also Ash Wednesday, is to remind our people, law enforcement, and people in general about the legends and to tell the stories that made our guests the legends that they are. That's why today, like I said, I'm sorry, I'm really excited that you're with us. It's truly an honor.
I appreciate it. I'm proud to be with you. You guys podcast as well.
Thank you, Warden. With that said, Bobby, tell us what you're drinking and what you're smoking, my brother.
First of all, I'm smoking a Don Pepin, my father. It's my father from Don Pepin.
Okay.
May rest in peace. It's I think you pronounce it Le Bijou, and it's been sitting in my box. Let's see, it was a cigar of the year, about in 2015, and look at this wrapper. Been sitting in my box for about 4 years. Look at that stain there, my wrapper.
It's really aged.
And I'm drinking. Yes, aged good. And what I'm drinking, I don't know if you ever had them in Mexico there, David, a carajillo. A carajillo, it was the last of my Licor 43. There's a 43. It's like a citrus sweet liqueur from Spain, and you get about 3 ounces of the liqueur in a glass of ice, and you top it with an espresso. So there it is.
Oh,
it's called Carajillo in the region of Spain.
That sounds good, man.
Carajillo, not a carajo, not a carajo, but a So that's what I'm having. And David, what are you having?
You know, Bobby, I don't know if you could hear me. My internet once again outside is going out, but I'll tell you what. Let me call you real quick. Let's see, Bobby.
I can hear you.
You can. Okay, good.
I don't see you, but I could hear you.
Okay, good. You know what? I'm drinking Casa Amigos, which is no. I'm sorry. I'm drinking Clase Azul Tequila. And I'm drinking Clase Azul Tequila in honor of our special guest. And I'm smoking a Luciano. They're called Luciano cigar. It's called Luciano Foreign Affair Toro. And I'll tell you, it's one of the best cigars that I've had in a very long time. I got the best cigar. I got the best tequila in honor of our guest today.
I'm having some water. I'm having bottled water, man.
Oh man, Warden, we told you. You don't drink anymore, Warden. I heard that.
I love my beer.
Do you? Okay.
La tequila me saca el indio.
Oh yeah.
Me saca la azteca.
Hey, Warden, man, like I said, we're honored to have you. Something's wrong with my camera, but we'll continue on with the show. Bobby, with that said, tell us who our guest is, and let's get this ball rolling, man.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all our guests for joining us and those who will be seeing this delayed, which is going to be recorded. I want to introduce our esteemed guests. Our guest worked 36 years. He had a 36-year career in corrections in the state of California. And we have all heard of us. All of us. I was a cop, but I worked prison gangs. So obviously we've heard of our guest. He started his career as a corrections officer and made his way up from a program administrator to associate warden, deputy, chief deputy, then warden. And he worked, had some of the craziest places: San Quentin State Prison, Soledad State Prison. Also was director of corrections of the Santa Clara County Jail System and warden of the California City Correctional Center facility. Yeah. All of us obviously known about San Quentin. San Quentin is the largest security. They have the largest SHU, which has 1,750 maximum custody prisoners and some of the worst, most evil people in the state of California housed there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
When I first got there, it was in December of '83. I was sworn in by Director Daniel McCarthy on my 40th birthday. And he nominated me for San Quentin. I arrived at San Quentin in December of 1983. It was maximum security. I was the last maximum security warden there.
Nice. Well, before we go into your career, we wanted to start out with a little bit of an intro where we'll allow you to introduce yourselves to us. If you can share a little bit of your upbringing and any prior experience. We spoke on the phone the other day. You told me a little bit about your military experience. How was it that you decided to go into the corrections, into the law enforcement side, and give us a little bit about your background, your upbringing as a child?
I was born and raised in a barrio in Southern California, in a little city called Redlands. The one claim to fame in Redlands is the Redlands University of Redlands. But anyway, I was raised in the barrio there. My dad came from Mexico. First, he came as an illegal immigrant, got busted by San Diego PD, and then finally, got his papers and immigrated. But I was raised with my dad. He was an orange picker. He picked oranges all his life, and that's where I started working, picking oranges with him at the age of 5 years old. But when I went to school, like you guys, I was raised with parents that spoke Spanish. So I went to school. I couldn't speak any English. The teachers me castigaban. They would put me in the closet, grabbed me by the ear and dragged me into the closet because I couldn't understand them. But anyway, a teacher by the name of Miss Kate, I'll never forget her. She saved me. She took me under her wing, took me to the library in Redlands, and taught me how to read and write. She saved my life. She was a great inspiration to me. I'll never forget her. But anyway, I started in the barrios. I went into the service. I was getting in trouble when I was a kid. Got arrested for an assault with a deadly weapon in a gang fight. And anyway, I had a probation officer. He was a good guy, always trying to help me. Every time I'd be trying to get in trouble, he'd come and pick me up at school. And, he kept me on the straight and narrow. But I had him clear my record, and I went into the United States Army at the age of 17 after my mom and dad signed, the waivers and all that stuff. So initially I was in the infantry. And I put in a request to be reassigned, and lo and behold, they put me in the MPs, military policemen in South Korea. And I was trained by draftees, police officers from all over the nation. They taught me good things in policing and some bad things too. But when I got out of I stayed in the military, left Korea, and I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I was a military policeman there. I got transferred there when the Bay of Pigs invasion went sour, and President Kennedy brought in 5,000 Cubanos, and they were being trained supposedly for another invasion in Cuba. They were being trained in infantry skills in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and that's where I went because I was able to, speak Spanish, So, but anyway, I did 3 years in the Army, and I got out, and I was 20 years old. And I went to visit my old probation officer. And I think I had mentioned this to Bobby. He pulled out, he says, "What are you doing?" I was picking oranges, man. I couldn't find a job. It was sort of a recession, And he pulled out an application from his desk drawer, and he says, "This is an application for the state." He says, they're hiring correctional officers. Why don't you fill it out? So I did. I filled it out, took the exam, and I started in corrections when I was 21 years old. In those days, there was no academy. So I went straight to uniform. And I remember the sergeant told me to walk the fence and don't let any inmates escape. Hell, I hadn't even seen an inmate. I didn't know what they wore. There was no phones. There was no radios. There was nothing. Just walking the fence line,
Hey, Warden, what year was this, and what was your first prison that you worked?
It was. I was 21 years old. It was 1965, February 2nd, and it was called the Southern Conservation Center. It was next to the Chino Camp, the California Institution for Men. It was a forestry camp training division of forestry and CDC. They trained inmates that had minimum custody to go out in fire camps to fight, do conservation work and fight fire, grass fires and forest fires and what have you. I transferred to Camp Pilot Rock, and I did 5 years at Camp Pilot Rock. It was in Crestline, California, in San Bernardino National Forest. And that's where I used my GI Bill, and I got my degree working a steady shift so I could have my complete my semesters. And anyway, the officers were all older than I was, and they allowed me to just stay on one shift so I could complete my college.
What college did you go to, Warden, back then? Where was this?
I graduated from the San Bernardino Valley Junior Valley College. I got my associate Arce degree, and that kind of opened up the doors for me. So anyway, I went back to the center, promoted, and in April 1990, I think I started in paroles. I became a parole agent.
So when you were working as a correctional officer 65, then you went to a camp, and then you promoted to sergeant, then lieutenant, or how was the promotional process back then?
I promoted to a position that was called a correctional program supervisor.
Okay.
You were still doing custody work, but you did casework for a caseload of 20 inmates. and you did their board reports. In that time, it was the adult authority that reviewed their cases for consideration of parole. So I did their classification work and their board reports, and still did security. And then in April, April of that year, I promoted to parole agent grade 1.
So this is like in 1970, Warden, when you promoted?
In April of 1970, I went to paroles.
Oh my God! And where did you start off, in LA or where at?
No, in Ontario, but
Really?
My initial casework were all narcotic addicts from CRC.
Yes.
And I tell people I had 72 vatos que eran tecatos, and I couldn't, I could find one, but I couldn't find the other 71. They were all using and absconding from me, So, but anyway, I enjoyed it. Then I went to the felon side. I did a caseload of 128 felon parolees.
Hey, Warden, did you know Brian Perry back then? Was he already with parole back then?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Really? And he was working in LA. He's been on our show too. Another legend been on our show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew Brian.
Yeah. So you worked with him in the streets in the 70s?
Yes, I did.
Really? Wow. So Warden, you being from the Inland Empire, that area, now you're a parole agent. How were you accepted in the barrio? I mean, I know Bobby and I and most Chicanos that, grew up in the neighborhood. We were never gang member. We grew up there. It really helped us in our career. I mean, we knew how to talk. We knew how to talk to people, and people would talk to us because of our upbringing. How was it for you, Warden?
Same way. I got raised in the streets,
Yeah. Yes.
And so but when I became in corrections, the homeboys, they didn't accept me too well. They used to call me a narco, que era narco, and all this stuff. Give me a hard time, But then after I succeeded, they started applying to be correctional officers. Guys that would give me the hard time, they became officers themselves. So but anyway.
I've always said, what?
Go ahead, Bobby.
I've always said, I've mentioned this to David, is there's a lot of people that go to seminars, they go to training, they go to university or whatever to get an education, to learn how to do this job. Yeah. But like I like to say, those of us who are from the barrio, we got an education you cannot buy because we lived it. Yeah. So that
got our PhDs in the streets.
Yeah.
Working, and it was, and I mentioned to the warden when I was talking on the phone, when I was working the gangs, and I was over at the FBI on the Emmett Task Force doing the Mexican Mafia RICO case that we did in Arizona. I was listening to phone calls of guys I had trick-or-treated with as a kid, with guys who my mother went to school with their mother, and it was crazy. You're sitting there thinking, by the grace of God, I went this direction and they went the other. But there were people.
Pretty much the same with me.
Yeah.
The armies would save my butt,
Yeah, most definitely. So Warden, now you're working parole. Now you got the hard felons. Back then in the 70s, I mean, you had all the mafiosos out, all the BGF, all the AB. Who did you work with? Did you have any of those guys? Topo Peters, Arce, el otro, what's his name? Joe Morgan. Did you have any of those guys on your caseload?
You know what? I had Cheyenne Cadena was on my
Really?
case. Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, he was one of the leaders of the MA,
Yes,
Yeah, I had Cheyenne. I sent him back to prison on a gun violation. He had a, ex-felon with a gun, and that's when he got killed in Palm Hall in Chino. He got stabbed to death by vatos from the Nuestra Familia.
Hey, Warden, what kind of a guy was he compared to others? I mean, could you see the leadership quality in him? Because when I hear that he was very intelligent and also had a socialist type of mentality, did you see that in him, or was he just a vato loco?
He was a little guy. He was very small in stature, but he was extremely intelligent. And he had enough moxie to be one of the leaders of the Mexican mafia, man. I mean, we all had our leadership roles in law enforcement. He had his leadership role in the Mexican mafia. He was well known as a leader next to Joe Morgan.
And Warden, was he respectful to you? Was he, like one of these guys that always respected law enforcement at the same time? You couldn't turn your back because they were killers.
Yeah, no, you know what? We got along. I always treated them with respect.
Yeah.
What you learn in the barrio to street, to get along with everybody. That's the way I treated him.
Mm-hmm.
And he completed his some of his parole and put in to go back to Bakersfield, and that's where he got in trouble with possession of a gun as an ex-felon. I sent him back to prison on a violation.
Wow. So also, you had some pretty hard. What about Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family? Did you have any of those guys on your case?
I had a guy his name was Steve Beacons. He was one of the leaders of the AB.
Uh-huh.
You heard of the Beacons Moving Company?
Yes.
Yes. His father was the president of Beacons.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Steve Beacons, and he was one of the leaders of the AB.
Uh-huh. They had a real famous shooting when I went through the academy. They always talked about. You probably heard about it too, Bobby. That Norco shooting.
Norco.
Yeah, were you working as a parole agent during that time, Warden? I don't remember the exact date. That's when they tried to rob a bank, and there was a big shootout with police officers. Several of the crooks died. I think one or two officers, may they rest in peace, also passed away during that shooting. Do you remember that, Warden?
That was in Los Angeles, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Wow, that's interesting.
That shooting really changed a lot even with the mentality of the PDs, because it was like a realization how outgunned we were.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's when a lot of us started getting issued rifles, getting trained in the use of rifles, because in that one, I believe in that shooting, they had to commandeer some rifles to be able to hold their positions. And if I remember right, that was that shooting there.
Yeah, this Seamus Donahue. Thank you, Seamus. It's Norco, May 1980. That was that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, Warden, what a man working state parole during that time. I mean, it was rocking and rolling, right?
Absolutely, man. I had an old guy that I went to see him at home, and he was pacing up and down the living room. I had a home call. He was making me nervous. And what the hell's wrong with this guy? Anyway, I found out later he had just robbed a bank that morning. And I was there at his house. I guess he had the money stashed somewhere in the house, and he was walking up and down the living room all nervous,
Uh-huh.
I guess he must have thought that I knew something about it, but I didn't know anything, Found out later that he had robbed the bank that morning.
Hey, Warden, so now you're with state parole. So when you also were in SSU, correct?
Yes, I was.
What year did you go to SSU? Do you remember?
Well, let's see. I think it was in 1970, if I'm not mistaken. I was appointed with two other parole agents into SSU to do intelligence work on the prison gangs.
Uh-huh.
They were becoming a threat to the institutions and beginning to align themselves with criminal street gangs in the communities of California. So our job was to gather intelligence.
And who were the other two agents? Do you remember?
It was Tony Casas was one.
Okay, yeah.
Tony passed away, unfortunately, and the other guy's name was Don Elder, and I think he retired. He's a PI out of San Joaquin County. The last time I seen him, but it was three of us that got kind of sideways into SSU,
Uh-huh.
And at first we weren't accepted. We had because usually they get appointed by a deputy, an assistant director. I forget his name now, but anyway, we were kind of brought in on the side,
Uh-huh.
So it was hard for them to accept us. But anyway,
how long were you there, Warden?
I was there two years as an SSU agent.
Really? Wow.
And I worked with a federal task force that had been funded. We worked behind Monterey City Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
There was a trailer there, and we worked with law enforcement one of the guys I worked with a lot was a sergeant from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, Loreto. Al Loreto was his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he was my partner. So we worked the streets together. He worked LA intelligence and I worked CDC intelligence. But we worked together.
Did you ever meet or did you ever supervise Raimundo Mendoza? Do you remember him?
No, it doesn't sound familiar. I don't think so.
Yeah. And let me just ask you, I know Bobby has more questions, but since we're talking about parole, I know a little bit about it. What about Bill Hankins? Did you ever meet Bill Hankins?
Absolutely. He was my contact in San Quentin. He was one of the best gang intelligence officers there was in the whole department, man.
Really?
Absolutely.
Did you ever meet him in person or just by phone?
I worked closely with him.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Bill Hankins. Yeah. He was a legend, man. His warden didn't pay attention to him. So I had to, talk with the warden and explain to him what levels of importance he was doing at San Quentin, tracking all these mafiosos, man, all the gang members. Finally, he got his due in terms of being recognized by the warden and taken serious. But no, he was a good friend.
Really? Wow.
Good mentor. Yeah. We worked very closely together.
A legend.
Absolutely, he was.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Go ahead, Bobby Spencer. I bet I got so many questions about parole, SSU.
I got all day.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I never worked. I talked to the warden. We talked to the phone. We had a great conversation the other day, and I had told him I was a cop, so I never worked where a lot of the people in the sheriff's department get to work in the jails. I worked with cops that worked for Maricopa County Sheriff's Department in detention, and those guys were always so squared away because they got that education of dealing with inmates. And I had told the warden that when I was working the Emmett Task Force, we worked with the prison and jail intel. And you discover as a cop, somebody obviously would never been in custody, thank God, is the world that there's a world inside that criminal world that I had no idea even existed, of how much control, how much the shots are called from inside. And as somebody who worked prison gangs, the intel officers inside the jail and in the prisons were like our golden egg, because you guys had so much information. And when I was on the Emmett Task Force, we would go to the different prison facilities and the jail. The jail, we were there almost daily. The prison facility down in Florence, Arizona, we were there once a week, meeting with the intel people because they were helping push our case. And we had a parole officer assigned to our task force that also would help us do with parole searches, go out and get weapons and act on information. So it was
3151. 3151 of the penal code was our authority. Kicked many a door down with officers using my 3150 PC.
We used Humberto Baba Preciado, who was our parole supervisor at our task force, and he was gold for us. He really helped us move our case along quite a bit, not only with the Emmett, but other gangsters that we were dealing with. Go ahead, David.
Hey, Warden. So, have you read Bill Hankins' book? The book that he wrote?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Do you have a copy of it, Warden?
You know what? I have it somewhere in my files in here. But
if you don't have one, Warden, after the show, I'll get your address. I'll send you a copy of it.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Outstanding book. Outstanding book. And there's a part 2 coming pretty soon, too, on that book. On Bill Hankins.
Great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Warden, so we have a question from Dennis Martinez. I think Dennis Martinez is retired law enforcement. I'm not sure. But he says, does Warden remember attempted prisoner escape on transport bus, Euclid Boulevard, Ontario?
Oh, yeah. That's
Can
where.
you talk about that, Warden?
That's where it was an officer. There was an officer shot and killed in that transport. And it was, who the hell was it? It was an AB and a mafia guy that got rescued on that bus transport, and an officer was killed. I remember that. very vividly. It was right after that that the director assigned us to the task force, to SSU, because of that incident.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it. Officer Sanchez was the officer that was shot and killed.
Did you respond to that, Warden? Were you already a correctional at the time?
I wasn't. Let's see. I was a parole agent, I think, by that time. I'm not quite sure, but no, it was responded to after the incident. But I was not part of the response.
Go ahead, Bobby. Question number 3. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to ask is what changes did you see from the time you started until the end? Was there anything that you wanted to maybe talk about of when you first started? Any differences professionally, things that you think that you were able to observe on how improvements were made, or did you see the improvements were made during that?
Well, you know what? Of course, some of the better improvements was an academy that was started by the Department of Corrections. That was one of the best things that could have happened. Officers were, instead of just getting thrown into the institutions like I did, they got a considerable amount of training. I think it was 6 months of academy before they got assigned to a prison. So that was one of the better changes I've seen. And in the training too of staff, the training, gang recognition training, and those kinds of things that were instituted before. A lot of the wardens, they didn't believe in the gangs. They thought they were a bunch of no accounts. They didn't realize what they had on their hands. So it took us as SSU agents to attend their meetings and train them exactly what their what the threat was in their institutions that were right under their noses that they weren't paying attention to. So those are some. Go ahead.
I heard your podcast last night, David, with Saul Ayala, where he talked about here in Phoenix, our chief of police, our local politicians, our mayor, they didn't believe we even had a gang problem here in Phoenix.
Yes.
Phoenix is just a smaller version of LA. And
yeah.
I went to gangs the very first time in '85. We had a 5-man gang unit. Really, we had a 4-man gang unit. Then the problem exploded, and suddenly we had to play catch up. And then eventually, like in the mid-'90s, not only did our department realize we had a gang problem, they realized that problem, a lot of it is run from the inside of the correctional facilities. And that's when our department made that and started depending more on investigators to work with correctional investigators on the problem of the world of the crime world that happens behind the walls. And all the shot callers that happens in there.
Yeah. You know what? When San Quentin transitioned from maximum security to a reception center, and I had a security squad that, they used to refer to them as the goon squad,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all trained to interface inside the institution. So what I did is I changed their mode of operation, and I had them split up and reach out to local county jails throughout, some of the more populated counties like Los Angeles and San Bernardino County, to interface with the jail staff to alert them as to what they had on their hands with, mafiosos or other gang members that were being coming into prison on convictions or parole violations. So I had them interface with local jails, and that's how we got we got kind of ahead of a step ahead of them, because they were coming into our prison as the violators were new commitments, and they were causing me more lockdowns than when I was a level 4 maximum security prison. It's because we didn't know anything about them. It's where the security squad started interfacing with the jails, as we got kind of, as they say, got a foot ahead of them,
And Warden, that's where I met Bobby Hernandez. Warden Bobby Hernandez. We became best friends in 87, in 80, 87, 80, 89, and 90. I was part of the prison gang task force, and he was your CAC, Criminal Activities Coordinator. And he would come to San Diego. We would go every month all over the state, and we'd party, have a great time. But Bobby was the guy everybody went to because you know what? He was your Criminal Activities Coordinator, and you had all the mafiosos there. You had Topo Peters, you had Bacha, you had everybody there. And Bobby would give everybody the latest information. Rich Valdemar from LA County Jail, Sergeant Legend, he would share, everybody would share, and Bobby would give us info, and he would take it back. Exactly like you said, Warden.
Was a good gang coordinator.
He was.
Had a good personality. You know, he could get along with the devil, as they say, you know.
Yeah, but that program that you instituted, I'm telling you, it worked because we would find out exactly what was going on in San Quentin and San Diego, LA, and then you would find out what would happen in San Diego and LA. Outstanding.
And the jails too, man. You know.
Warden, let me ask you one quick question. Give us, when you were in SSU, is there anything that stands out, any memorable case or moment that stands out when you were in SSU?
Yeah.
I mean, you were one of the founding members of SSU.
I remember one night where Al Loretto and I were getting ready to go home, and the guys in the task force, they told us, we had been working a lead of mafiosos that would work with the coyotes, bringing the illegal aliens into Los Angeles area, set them up with jobs and set them up in apartments, safe houses. Mm-hmm. And then they would rob them. Then when their paydays were, they would put on a cheap suit and get a badge from a Cheerio box and rob these guys. Mm-hmm. So we worked up the case, and there was a guy by the name of anyway, Loretto and I were going home, and they asked us to cover the back door of a house where these guys were being arrested for the robberies. Mm-hmm. And this guy jumped out of the window, started running up the driveway, and I pulled my gun, and I said, "Hold it, get your hands up." And I got cottonmouth, man. That's the first time I had ever pulled a gun on anybody other than shooting in the range. Uh-huh. So I got all cottonmouth, man, and I couldn't say another word. And now Loretto's the one that told me, "Hey, you mother heifer, get down and then spread your arms and legs and don't move, or I'm gonna kill you," But man, I had never pulled a gun on anybody. I'm not ashamed to tell that story, but it was at the time it was quite an experience, man.
An experience.
And you guys are guns on people, man.
Yeah.
A follow-up on that question. I always wondered about this too. What kind of interaction did you see with the Chicano street gang, the mafia, or any of those street gangsters with the paisas, with the illegal aliens in custody?
This is back then, Bobby?
Back then. No, before there were border patrols and all that.
They started more interaction with the paisas when they started moving drugs for the cartels.
Yeah,
that's when they started paying attention to them.
Back then, they would just call them pollos. They would just call them derogatory terms. The Chicanos from LA, the Chicanos from Inland Empire, they just saw them as pollos. They just saw them as they couldn't associate with it because they were Chicanos, right, Warden? Back then in the 70s.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So Warden, so now you're in SSU. Now you go back to custody. Why did you go back to custody? Most people do their whole career in SSU.
Yeah.
Ryan Perry and so many others. Why did you go back to custody?
In SSU, there was little opportunity for advancement.
Okay.
Because SSU was such a small unit, as you guys remember as well. So the director of corrections asked me if I was interested in returning to Soledad. So I went there as you were called a classification and parole representative. And I was in charge of the records office and in charge of all the casework that was being done by the correctional counselors in their units. And so I supervised that area. And then I got promoted to program administrator and went to Susanville, California Correctional Center, not the new prison. So I got there as a program administrator. Initially, I was kind of like a captain in central services, visiting room, entrance and exit gates, security housing unit, all the gun towers and gunmen. And then I promoted to associate warden of operations and reported to the warden, as a second in command operating the custody side of the facility.
Hey, Warden, when you were in Susanville, I believe as a captain, there was a big riot. There was a big incident, and you basically came in, and that's when the director of correction says, this guy's going to be a warden. This guy's a leader. Can you share that incident?
You know what? There was an associate warden by the name of Townsend. I think he's deceased now, but there was a Mexicano that was a warden. His name was Zenon Palacios. And unfortunately, his redneck associate didn't like him. So he tried to set him up. Mr. Palacios went to visit Mexico with his wife, and the riot broke out. And so Townsend was out at a meeting, and he took his time getting back because he figured, he didn't care about the staff safety or inmate safety. He was just going to set the warden up, So I was there, and I took over. And I did.
And the warden, Palacios, he was a Chicano? That was a Chicano warden?
Yes, he was. Yes.
Really? Was that one of the first Chicano wardens? I mean, because I thought...
He was one of the first ones.
Really? Wow. And he's the one that took you up there? You knew him, or when you got there, he was already there?
When I got there, it was he took a warden by the name of Paul Morris. He took his position. Paul Morris, in Gabacho, he was warden there, and Palacios took his place. And Morris got promoted to deputy director up in operations and headquarters.
And Palacios first, was he actually the first warden in the state of California?
Warden. Yes, he was.
Wow. Yeah. That is wonderful. Is he still alive, Warden, or has he passed away?
I don't know. It's been a long time. No, I don't know. He was older, much older than I was. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not.
So, Warden, so there's a riot. Is it the blacks and Hispanics or whites, or was it just was it all-out prison riot?
It was a racial. It was between the Mexicanos, the whites, and the blacks. And at that incident, the gunmen, they fired 123 shots, man. Wow. 123 mini 14 shots were fired during that riot. The inmate, they were shooting through the doors and the windows, and they wounded 5 inmates pretty seriously, So that's when I took over that riot and ran it until Mr. Palacios got back, and that's where.
And Warden, so tell us, what did you do? I mean, you immediately just took command. You were the incident commander, started deploying all the troops where they were supposed to be. I mean, because that was probably was that your first riot in a prison setting?
Yes, it was. That was my first one. I cut my teeth in riots at Susanville, believe it or not, So, yeah, that was my very first riot. So I just thought of, I don't know, just a little bit of instinct, I guess, and a little bit of job knowledge. I just took over and ran the damn place.
Seamus Donahue saying, let me guess, D facility. The D stands for Detroit. Does that mean something? The D facility back then?
Back then, it was the facilities were the Sierra unit and Cascade unit. There was 2 600-man inmate facilities.
Yeah. Wow. Bobby, if you have something else, please jump in, brother, because you know what? This is so fast. Did you just hear that? He worked for the first Chicano warden in the state of California, Mr. Palacios. Oh, man, that is beautiful to know that. And a great leader. Yeah. So, Warden, so now the riot happens. So now everybody says, hey, man, this guy has balls. This guy's a leader. This guy. Where did you go from there? Then you became an associate warden there in Susanville?
Yes, I became an associate warden there in Susanville. And I was associate warden of custody initially. And then I got appointed to the appeals office, inmate appeals grievance office. In those times, associate wardens ran or oversaw the inmate appeal system. So I took over that job, and then I was moved in grade back to Soledad as associate warden. And initially I was in the appeals office there, and then I got assigned to a North facility. It was a 1,200 inmate level 3 facility. I did a year there and then went to Central as a deputy, and then I got promoted to chief deputy warden there at
What year was that, Warden? What year was that when you were in Soledad? Is that when they had the Soledad brothers? They had all kinds of killings there in Soledad. Was it during that era?
It was before. The Soledad brothers was before my time at Soledad.
Your time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would always hear about Soledad. Very, very. It was. I mean, it wasn't equivalent to San Quentin in violence, but it was there. It was right there.
It was a jumping institution, I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, what's your most memorable assignment? Which one? You know, I was able to work a lot of really good assignments with the Phoenix PD, but my favorite, when I look back, the most fun was working and walking the city housing projects in uniform. What is your favorite or most memorable when you look back at your prestigious career? What is it that that maybe you had job satisfaction, accomplishment? What are your assignments that you look back at with that kind of fondness?
Being a warden at San Quentin was one of my a super accomplishment, especially being the warden there. I had 1,460 inmates in security housing unit, all gang members or gang associates, or people, inmates that had assaulted staff or other inmates, or killed staff or killed inmates. I had 1,460 in lockup. I had an 800-man general population. 50% of them were serving life without the possibility of parole. And their age group was 18 to 24 years of age.
Warden, we're going to bring you back with your permission. We'll talk after the show, because we want the next episode to be about nothing but when you became the warden.
Okay.
Because everything that I've read, that I've heard from Bobby, that I heard from so many people, man, that is a whole show in itself. I mean, the changes you made, the things you made. But we have a question for one of our listeners, Everlasting Bass. I remember when the TV show Unsolved Mysteries interviewed Warden Vasquez. Do you remember that interview, Warden?
Yeah, it was about one of the escapes, an escapee that escaped from San Quentin. We never found that sucker. He's still gone, as far as I know, man.
And he escaped while you were the warden there, Warden?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay. We didn't. Nobody knew how he escaped.
Yeah.
But he managed to escape San Quentin and stayed at large.
Warden, let me ask you one question. This is my last question. I think Bobby might have one or two more. But my last question is, before you became a warden, is there any, now we're talking about being in custody, any incident, any case that stands out that you could say, you know what, I'll never forget that? It could be in Soledad, it could be in that riot in Souzaville, in custody before becoming a warden. I'm sure as a warden, there's so many others, but before, is there one that you could share with us?
Well, I think this being the chief deputy warden at Soledad, we had 6,000 inmates at Soledad, and that Central and North facility were jumping, man. They were sending so-called dropouts from all the gangs to Soledad Central, but in fact, most of these guys weren't dropouts at all. They were still running things, Yeah. So I think Soledad was a very, very interesting and memorial job that I did in my career, and of course San Quentin.
And from Chris Kilby, a legend, bless this man. Keep them legends alive. Gray Line, keep telling them stories. Be safe. Bless this man. Yeah. Bobby, any last questions for the warden? And next episode will be all about the warden, but anything else, Bobby?
Any words of wisdom for any young corrections officers that are climbing the ladder, looking to become a deputy warden, a warden? Any words of wisdom to help them professionally and mentally when they get up there? Any words of wisdom for any of those?
You know what? What I did is I learned the operation of the institutions from A to Z, as they say. I learned everything from the reception of inmates to ordering toilet paper. I learned everything that I could in the operation of a prison, a city, which was a prison. And that be my advice to the young correctional officers these days, is to learn everything of the operation of your institution and keep on learning. That's what I did, and that was the key to my success. And I guarantee it'll be the key to their success as well.
Outstanding.
Well, Warden, we are honored. Like I said, once again, we will talk to you after the show. I'll give you a call so we could schedule. We would like for you to come back and just talk about when you were the warden. And then one more episode, if you're kind enough to help us, I want to talk about the legends of your time. Like Mr. Calderon, Mr. Ayers, Bobby Hernandez, so many others that you worked with that people have forgotten in time. You know what I mean? And maybe that could be our last episode, if you're okay with it.
Absolutely. I'm at your disposal.
And Warden, there's a lot of people that have been asking about blood in, blood out, but we'll reserve that for when you were the warden. Is that all right?
I'm sorry, what did you ask?
Yeah, there's several people right now, because we have a separate chat, people watching the show that are asking about Blood In, Blood Out, the movie.
Yeah.
And but we'll talk about it when you're the warden. We'll talk about it on the next episode if you're okay with that.
That's fine. Anything you guys want to talk about.
Warden, thank you very much once again. Bobby, any last words for the warden?
Thank you. It's been an honor having you on here, and we look forward to having you again return back. Thank you again.
Enjoy your drinks and your cigars.
Yeah, thank you, Warden. I'll give you a call later on tonight. All right.
Okay. Give me the Bill Hankins book. Okay.
Yes. I'll get your address. All right. Thank you, Warden. God bless you. Thank you.
Adios.
Man, brother. Wow. It's funny, Bobby, that in our other show, Gray Line, whenever we have legends like that, afterwards, I'm literally like, wow, these are men that I never would have gotten the opportunity. We never would have gotten the opportunity if we didn't have this show. These legends, you know what I mean? Wow. What did you think, Bobby?
It's important to hear their stories. All the legends out there. It's so important to hear their stories and to be able to have them tell us what the experiences they went through. And I think one of the other things is for the younger generation that is still out there, that is still working behind the walls, that are still doing parole, that are still working the streets. It's very important to remember these are the people that set the table for the rest of us. And even though you and I are out of the game, I think it's just very, very important to let their memories live and bring up their stories. I'm looking forward to the next episodes we have with him. Yeah. Me too.
And with that said, where is it? Lena, when he comes back in about 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to work his schedule. We'll ask him about Armando Duran. And I'm sure that he'll remember that. Without a doubt, he'll remember that. And talking about Doug Collier, next week, really looking at part 2. Doug, we're looking forward to having you with us. Bobby and I, we're going to have you help us next week with a special interview that we have with Steve Duncan. Bobby, show everybody. I talked to Steve about you, and he remembers giving you that poster. He said I think he gave you 2 posters, he said.
He gave me
2 posters. Yes.
And I have one, and the other one is in the Serb Republic of Bosnia with, at the time, he was the chief of narcotics. And he was, he just loved the American law enforcement stories. And when I was leaving, I gave him a copy, and from what I heard, he still has it up on his wall. He has now, he went from being chief of narcotics, where now I think he's like a chief of police now. But he was a great guy. He did some narcotics cases with us, and some drug loads that came out of Venezuela to Panama, and we made the seizures over in Italy with DEA Milan, DEA out of Milan. So he has the second poster up on his wall.
Well, he's going to be happy to hear that, because I told him you were my co-host, or we were co-hosts, and he goes, I remember I gave that guy 2 posters. I go, well, he has 1. He goes, I gave him 2. But you know what, Bobby? He's going to be with us next week, and one of the things that that Steve's going to be talking about. He's going to be actually breaking down with Doug Collier, breaking down the movie Traffic. And I believe that movie Traffic came out probably in the early or mid 90s, right, Bobby? Do you remember?
Yes. I'm guessing, Rob, I think it was probably late 90s when it came out.
When it came out, and I'm telling you, that movie had a Nostradamus touch to it. Because back then, you remember, Bobby, growing up in the barrio. I remember growing up in Chula Vista, Otay area. All the Chicanos the majority were Tecatos. You would go to Logan Heights, the blacks and the Chicanos. You very rarely saw white people or the Gabachos using, you know what I mean? Very rarely. Maybe if you went, the old hippies. But that movie basically predicted when Michael Douglas, his daughter, becomes a drug addict. He was in the government. And everything we're seeing today with fentanyl. I mean, back then when that movie came out, people said, that's not true because it's not happening in La Jolla. It's not happening in the higher, there was drugs, cocaine, but not the fentanyl, the way heroin addiction. And now we're seeing it. But the thing about Steve Duncan is it's everywhere, but he is going to break down every character in the movie, who they were in 2000, Doug, right on, Doug, when the movie came out. Every character compared to the Arellanos, whom they were, Kiri Paez, Ramon Arellano, Eduardo, he's going to break them all down and talk about them. So, man, I am looking forward. I'm with you, Chris, Stevie D. Let's go. He'll be here next week. Doug Collier will be co-hosting with us. It's going to be an awesome show, man. And then, and also before I forget, today, guess who reached out to me? Margarito Flores.
Awesome.
Tell our people who Margarito Flores is. I know you spoke to
Flores and his brother. Yeah, Margarito Flores and his brother were running Sinaloa or Chicago for Sinaloa back in the day. Mm-hmm. So Margarito is now in witness protection. And he's, we had a great conversation. We've talked several times. He's a great guy. Yes. And the thing is, he's an incredible story. I won't give it away.
No.
I mean, after I talked to him, I was like, oh my God, it was, God works in, as they say, God works in mysterious ways. And this guy will have a very good story. I would encourage everyone to listen in when we have him on. But, how we got started, how big they got, and eventually, the guilt he feels, the guilt, and now the redemption. We all fall, and he's gotten up, and he's doing some really good work. He's working with law enforcement now. So really looking forward to that episode.
And Bobby, they were the ones that took down Chapo Guzman, right? They were the ones that took him down. I mean, they were literally the ones that took Chapo down. Yeah. Well, he reached out to me. Steve Duncan gave him my number. He reached out to me. He wants to come on the show. So we got him. We got Steve Duncan. And then we're bringing the Warden back. Oh, brother, the sky's the limit. I am excited. Ash Wednesday, I'm telling you, it's growing. And like I always tell, Chris Kilby one time has mentioned, why don't you guys have 1 million followers? A great show. And I told Chris, Chris, we could have 1, or we could have 1,000, we could have 1 million. It doesn't matter. To us, what matters is bringing these legends back, hearing these stories, and that's my satisfaction. I know it's yours too, Bobby.
Absolutely.
It's our satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bobby, any last words? We're getting ready to say goodbye, and what a show tonight. What an honor to have the Warden. Yeah.
My last word, I talked to you earlier. I was running around all day today, and I've not eaten all day. This cigar that I'm smoking is a powerhouse. So right now I can feel it. Me siento medio menso. I'm like buzzed right now. Yeah. And so looking forward to the future shows we have, and hopefully we'll continue to find other guests. The guests that we bring can recommend other ones, and we'll continue with this program.
And you got a couple of great guests coming from Phoenix PD, legends.
Yes.
So we'll get together. I'll call you tomorrow. I'm going to call the Warden right now, get a date for him, and so we could get your legends on. All right. Hey, brother, God bless you. God bless everybody that's watching. And remember, live a purpose, live and drive, live in life, and live every day like it's your last. God bless you.
Yeah.
Used to spend my nights out in Parole. Liquor was the only love I'd known. But you rescued me from reaching for the bottom.